Hello everyone, welcome back to the final of the stint of 20s that I have for you guys. It is a Theatre of Pain, being released obviously on the European reset. So for all of us in Europe, hopefully you all got something good in your chest today. There will also probably be the weekly reset that has either been released before or after this video, with it being on Wednesday. So obviously fill you guys in on the raiding news and whatnot there. So let's get into the Theatre of Pain without any further delay. Now, for those of you that have watched the other videos, this is off the back of that Halls of Atonement run that we've just done. So we're a little bit hyped, a little bit worried, and as you can see, already making a mistake. Now, this particular mistake was the fact that Stormy thought he was in bear form and wasn't. So we're kind of just like, oh, what the hell? And things get a little bit chaotic here. You know, bit of a wake up call for humility in some places, but it's fine. These mistakes happens. Theatre of Pain isn't too bad. The only really punishing part of Theatre of Pain, specifically if you die and make mistakes, is going to Cult the Rock. So I'm just going to skip this cluster because it essentially just becomes a trash fight. There's not really much to discuss. Stormy is de-enraging as and when he can remember. Unfortunately, that raging tantrum went off. Thankfully, it's not fortified, so it wasn't as punishing and could be healed through. But we kind of corrected everything. And as a result, we have cooldowns, we have lust, we have all our CDs as we initially planned and just go into the boss. I am running my single target build here. Using Divine Resonance Legendary rather than Tempest. The only concession to AoE being Mythic Plus that I have for this dungeon is the fact that I am running Imperium Power rather than rather than Blade of Wrath. I will probably, either off the back of the weekly reset or in the next day or so after you guys have watched this video, be releasing the compiled data through Excel and the visual representation of the keys with Imperium Power procs and Blade of Wrath. The general average as things currently stand is looking at 5 to 8 procs of Art of War a minute when running Zeal and Blade of Wrath. This means that if we go at the lower end of 5, then we're looking at, bearing in mind this is an average, because there were some dungeons that were 20 minutes long where I had 70 odd procs of Art of War, and there were others 23 where I only had 23 procs of Art of War, so it was 1 a minute. We're averaging an extra 2 to 3 Wake of Ashes, assuming a full 50% disparity, which in turn means that potentially the days of running Imperium Power for M Plus dungeons is going to go out the window. But we will see. One thing that I will note about Theatre of Pain, and I don't understand why Blizzard did it, through the entirety of Season 1, they removed the rogue component of this fight. The rather irritating blood elf that comes and CCs you. And then obviously during this season they decided to re-implement her, and I've got no idea why. Just makes the fight irritating rather than challenging. But it's fine. Managed to get through the boss with no problems. We do have 3 deaths currently, so it's going to be a case of wising up. We had a bit of a talking to at this point about making sure that we got through it and did a proper job of it. Because obviously this is the last key that we need. Thankfully, at this particular point, we do actually have 2 keys. We have my 20 Theatre of Pain that we're currently doing, and we have times 21 Theatre of Pain that was from the Sanguine Depths that we did earlier in the evening. So we do have 2 attempts at running this. And although we're not trying to treat this as the quote-unquote practice run, we are also trying to keep it as chilled as possible rather than stressing, being like, oh, this is the only attempt we've got for this week. Because that was the case we had last week with a Theatre of Pain we did. Was it last week or the week before? Can't remember. But, yeah. So, Varus pretty much goes into it. No real problems to speak of. The next room is a little bit sloppy because through an accident and no fault of our own, in the Xav room we realised that there's every possibility that you can pull pretty much this entire room. Probably wasn't the smartest move to do while an Inspiring Conscript was up, but it's a DM Rage, thankfully, Battle Trance, so Stormy can instantly remove it. So we pull everything, and we do end up with a death here, as you're about to see, but that is unfortunately due to being stomped on. Gumba stomped by the Brutalizer on top of Sogadon and just not being able to get Arc out of it fast enough. But it's alright. Because that's the only death for it, I believe. Because this root, snare, and leap thing paired with the stun is really punishing. But it's alright. Arc comes back with his cooldowns. And pretty much everything just gets deleted at this point. Because we have that much AoE that the root itself, when we're prepared for it, is negligible. Because all the chains die almost immediately. Either from me or blade storming with procs, to Stitches spinning crane kicks, to Arc just chain lightning and going to town like he is there. So you can see there that I did the work that time. Execution sentences on the Brutalizer, because I'm trying to get that down, because Sogadon really isn't a problem for Stormy. But while we have the Brutalizer up, Stormy can take a lot of damage. And it's not damage that I can tank or taunt. So he was the focus. Also, just so happened that he had more health, so he was the better target for execution sentence anyway. Now, this is the section where we have to really, really focus. So you can see here, looking at my gear, that I'm running a lot higher versatility. And by right-clicking the crit, I gained the mastery. Because it dynamically adjusts. So by using Overwhelming Power Crystal, I can force it into crit. However, in doing so, that's a Chain Lightning pull, unfortunately. Stormy had pulled everything bar this Inspiring Mob, but we just pop cooldowns and kill it. Because Chain Lightning will always travel the farthest it can. So it has a preference to take targets that are further away than closer. Which does cause some CC problems on certain fights, like in Necrotic Wake. If he tries to Chain Lightning the Crossbowman and he occasionally gets a mage, it will pull it out of the turn evil. Obviously, for fights like Armath in Necrotic Wake, if the ads are CC'd, then they don't blow up. Which allows you to focus more on the boss. But back to this dungeon at hand anyway. So, looking at my cooldowns, I've got 11 seconds on wings, 19 on my minutes, execution sentence is ready to go, and the next pack, or the next mob, kinda needs to die quickly. Because sometimes we pull them together, other times we wait for the first for Soulstorm, and then we chain pull into it. My task here is to kill it as quickly as possible, so we only get the one Soulstorm. So I've got everything. You can see that I've also held Holy Power rather than spending it. So I go into a Seraphim, I judge it, and we're good to go. And that's what I do. Stormy's Bronn also comes out, because Stormy is running Kyrian for this particular dungeon. And we kill it pretty quickly. That quaking does come through, and because I'm running much higher versatility this time around, I actually survive. I survive by the skin of my teeth, but I survive. I then put the portal stone in. Accidentally, wasn't intended for me to pick it up, but I just made the most of the situation while I had it, and we go through it. Now, I'm not wearing my usual transmog for this, and the only reason for that is to try, or I thought to try it, was to put a little bit of differentiation between the two Tauren Paladins that you've got running around. Because one observation of Stitch was that with me running my silver and blue transmog with the totem across my back, that at a glance, Time and I look almost identical. Time likes the Tauren Heritage armor, and although it does look nice, the only part of it I like is the totem on the back, because it reminds me very much of the World of Warcraft Classic cinematic that I first saw when I was 11. So, huge nostalgia vibes. Tauren running through the snowy landscape near Ironforge and just twatting a bear and charging at a dwarf hunter. Now, one thing to say is that these bone maguses tend to cause a little bit of panic in our group, not because they're overly dangerous. Bone Spear definitely hurt, but the big part of what bothers us is the fact that we're always trying to get kicks, and as a result, we all scramble to get what kicks we can, but the Bone Maguses have two different casts. They have obviously Bone Spear, and then they have another one. Now, the other one can be let through, but when you're so determined to not let a cast go off, it can cause problems. Now, thankfully, my wings have lined up well enough again that I can deal with this Portal Guardian, so that's what I do, and because we powered the Bone Magus where it stood, we can get them far enough away that the Necromancer can be kicked. Which then means that this pack isn't a problem. Now, I am running Pelagos. No, sorry. I was about to say I'm not running Pelagos for this dungeon, even though it is a boss smash. And the reason for that is because of Brawn and being able to weave in more Divine Tolls throughout the course of this dungeon. Now, weaving the Divine Tolls through the dungeon and getting more of them is actually beneficial, especially with Divine Resonance going. So, this kind of playstyle with Brawn and Mechanicos and stuff like that is probably a good way to look at how we might be running in 9.2. Because if Vanquish's Hammer and Necrolord doesn't become our go-to, then Zeal constantly being applied by the Divine Resonance, judgments, and through our natural judgments themselves, mean that we can have an incredibly high uptime on Zeal, which increases our order attack speed, which increases our proc rate of Blade of Wrath, or increases our proc chance of Art of War through Blade of Wrath, because Blade of Wrath obviously doubles our Art of War proc chance from 12% per auto attack to 24% per auto attack. Now, this is the final platform, and this is where it could all go horribly wrong. So we are all on our A game at this point. We are not letting any cast go off, and I am using my minutes. Wings does come back off in 2 and is now off cooldown, but we don't need to worry about it. So you've got rings being used, you've got war stomps, you've got blinding lights. So you see me use that blinding light as quickly as I can to get a kick off. Bone Ray just goes down, and so does the Necromancer, which just leaves the Death Speaker. And at this point, we're all breathing a huge sigh of relief, because dying here would cripple the key. Had we have died there, it would have been a just run out and do it again, because we wouldn't be able to recover from that. So you can see, because I used my minutes where I did, I've got 13 seconds yet until using them again. So what I do is I actually hold. Bloodlust has been used, but I hold, hoping that I'm targeted with the first Draw Soul. Because having Draw Soul and having your cooldowns, I probably, in hindsight, I should have held Seraphim and not used it. Now, I'm quite lucky here, and Draw Soul is on me, which means I get the damage bonus, and I can burst. So, in hindsight, should have saved Seraphim if I was going to commit. But I actually but I ended up basically the cause of that was I used Seraphim and then changed my mind. Now, because I burst Withdraw Soul, I'm doing a hell of a lot more damage, which allowed me to obviously climb and surpass stage. Now, unfortunately for this fight, Kultharok decides that she really wants to take my soul, and I get targeted with most of them. There is a point where I sack time, and doing so was probably a really bad idea because it nearly kills me. Again, kind of kept alive, I think, by my versatility more than anything else, because I am running about 14% verse. Now, here I bubble, because I'm not sure I'm going to be able to get to the other one, and as you can see to the right-hand side of my screen, there is a gripping hands in the air. The reason for this is because if those gripping hands are to land on an area that is near or on top of a spike in this arena, they don't land, they just stay in the air. So you can see that I was told that there was one on the other side of the boss, and I run round to it, which allows Stitch to focus on that one. Another draw soul. And you can see that I'm now directly under one as well as right next to one. So that is something you do need to be wary of if you're ever doing higher keys. Don't assume that there'll always be one on your side and be prepared to move. But Kultharok's going down at a reasonable pace. I should make this one, which I do, thankfully. Time is getting slapped by something, not sure what, and I am equally being clappered by something. But second Bronc comes through and basically just acts as a healer. Now, with Quaking, we could have made that gap. I could have cavaliered over it like Time did, or Divine Steeded over it, but that would have meant taking damage from both him and Stitch. And by taking the portal, I end up taking my Quaking out of the way. Now, this was an interesting pull, actually. We should have known, based off like the Plaguefall that we did last week, that Stormy at times can do an incredible amount of DPS, but we weren't expecting him to pull this out. So you can see that I'm pulling about 30 and Stormy's pulling close to 40k DPS, and we've got no idea where this came from. He obviously had his cooldowns and he was prepped to go, so he just pulls the entire room. And it very nearly put the shits up us, because we weren't prepared for it. We managed to, and we did all right, but still, this is kind of where Stormy's hyper-aggression can... It's both good and bad. Because Stormy just goes. There was no heads up. He just went. Now, we were a little bit lucky there, in the fact that Ring of Peace pushed the Inspiring Mob far enough to one side that when it leapt towards Ark and the tank, that it was still up enough to instantly push the other Spewer, so neither of the withered diseases got off. Because it's a very punishing disease, because not only does it do damage, it also reduces the healing done and the damage done as well to people affected by it. We do have 3 disease dispels, but still, better to avoid having it on the target if need be. Now, one criticism that I do have with Theatre of Pain is it feels like it wasn't really designed as an M+ dungeon. And the reason I say that is because of the 2 patrolling ads here. It is very much a case of RNG and timing if you're able to get through without pulling them. Thematically, and on a Mythic 0, I think they're lovely. and it's a nice touch and definitely makes Theatre of Pain a unique dungeon as far as they go. But when you're speed running, boy, do they get irritating. Because as you're about to watch, we actually bounce backwards and forwards between the two, trying to work out which side to go. Stormy, being a character that can stealth, can just go round them. And you can see that we're like, no, we can't go that way, and we can't go that way. So what do we do? And because Stormy caught its attention as he was stealthing around, it just froze in place. This then ends up forcing us to invis. Because we could have waited a few extra seconds for it to get into place, but we still have the rest of this Gorechop wing to do, and then the remainder of Xav to do before we even get onto Mordretha. And remembering that it is a tyrannical week, it is quite punishing. Now, this particular pack, the diseased horror is the inspiring mob, so we can't stop the other diseases. So we have to instantly dispel, and we just have to do what we can. Thankfully, withering discharge, sorry, rather than withering disease. I got caught in that AoE area. I shouldn't have done. That was bad on me, but it's fine. Now, this rancid gas bag pack is a pain because you have to remember that his discharge is both frontal and rear facing. So you kind of have to be stood to his sides, but with the amount of other diseases that go out, like you see here, I get pinned. I freed him over the disease to get out of it, and we kind of move forward. But they leap around. Stormy kind of faces them in weird places, so it can't be helped because he will also just randomly turn around and face a target and target it. But it does mean that we're kind of tight for space, which means that given it's also quaking this week, means it could be very, very, very punishing, especially for larger melee groups. Now, Time and I have to move close enough to these ads that we socially aggro them. Or proximity aggro them. And Stitch has to come on with a clutch ring of peace in order to keep Time from getting clobbered. Which is fine. Like, it works, but it's just one of those problems in terms of that is a very tight area to play. Now, we pull the two targets into the boss fight. I have my minutes, so I use them, with Wings having 27 seconds left. I think it's easier to have Wings off cooldown for 20 odd seconds, waiting for my minutes to come back, than for me to hold everything for Wings. So that's how I play this particular fight. Now, what I probably should have done there is just smack the ad, rather than just stood there waiting, but it can't be helped. At 7 seconds until Wings, or 7 seconds until my burst. So I'm holding Holy Power. Really shouldn't hold Holy Power as often as I do, but I'm consciously trying to get it so I can quickly go into Seraphim and things like that, rather than having to wait for Crusader Strikes and other spenders, or other generators. But not really too much else to say, really, for Gorechop. Doing a reasonable amount of DPS, 10, 11k. Time's about to pull his DPS out with his Ashen Hollow, and boss is kind of going to go down with no real problems. So yeah, Gorechop's gone down. We've got 12.5 minutes for a wing and 2 bosses. Stitch is doing the honours and grabbing the Ventia banner. I'm averaging 8.5k DPS at the moment. That's not big, but it's not bad either, because obviously this isn't as trash-centric as, say, the Halls of Atonement we did. Which is why Ark is struggling somewhat, because Ark is generally much better in dungeons than I am, but he struggles for single target. It's one of the weaknesses of Elemental Shaman at the moment. Hopefully it's something that'll be rectified in phase in 9.2, but we'll see. Hopefully within the next week or so we'll have the 9.2 PTR go live, and I can start doing a few videos off that based off what information there is. Even if it's just the tier set and playing around with the tier set on a target dummy and seeing how things feel. Now, something that didn't necessarily need to happen here, because Stormy being Kyrian can give a damage reduction to a target. So you'll see here that Ark ends up getting Kindred Spirited, which means that he's not taking anywhere near as much damage, but I still bop him anyway. That's a misplay on my part, because I thought that Kindred Spirit was over, and I wanted to protect Ark from taking any unnecessary damage from these Arbalists, because I still had Bubble myself, and War Stomp and Blind... Well, War Stomp had been used, but I still had Blinding Light. So, wouldn't have needed to worry too much about myself. Now, unfortunately, Advent Nevermore is nasty... or is rather unfriendly to casters. The reason for that is because of the shield. So Ark kind of gets a bit screwed here, because the Unbreakable Guard, if it's facing you, means you have to obviously get behind her to do damage. Now, for us melee, that's much easier, because we can just kind of pivot around her, but not for Ark. That's another Kindred Spirit that you can see there. Kindred Spirit's on a minute cooldown, so it's pretty strong, to be fair. It's a little bit off-putting, because it seems to come up before every minute. Because we tried it with me playing, obviously, Red. Because we get Mastery. If it's Kyrian to Kyrian, you get Mastery. Doubled, I think, when using, if the tank is using the, or if Storm is using the Legendary. Arden Wield, or Night Phase get Haste. Bruise get Verse. Not Bruise. Necrolords get Verse, and Ventias get Crit. I was going to reapply Sharpening Stone, but then kind of thought sod it, because we got 9 minutes left. So yeah, you can see I'm at 41% crit, 71% mastery, and 28% haste. With 20-odd% versatility at the moment, because of times T and other bits and pieces. So one problem that we had with this particular Xav fight was Stitch got caught out a couple of times and died. I didn't have any cooldowns here, so I told Stitch to kill me. But I did panic, because obviously Quaking still comes through, and I was concerned that my Quaking would, or his Quaking would kill me, because, you know, Blizz gonna spaghetti. But thankfully it doesn't, because we are hostile to each other. So Deafening Crash, we come up. Stitch dies, although Stitch was out of it. The only theory I have for it is the fact it was a server end thing, and it showed Stitch not being in it. Or rather, on Stitch's end, he was out of it, but on the server's end, he was still technically in it, which obviously results in his death. it will happen one more time to Stitch as we go through this fight. So I can only assume it was a server problem, but we kind of just pushed through it anyway. So another deafening crash, we're fine. And then it is both Arc and Stitch this time. Now, Stitch didn't have anything, so it was Arc's turn to murder him. And because I don't have any cooldowns, this oppressive banner kind of lives longer than it should. It's kind of concerning, really. Because the longer this oppressive banner's up, the more the snare. So I have to freedom and charge out. Time still gets hit by it, so bubbles. And it then dies. Stitch just calmed that, and as you can see, he's kind of bouncing around, so that's kind of what leads me to think it was a server/lag issue. But we got through it because now I have cooldowns, and the oppressive banner will die. But it is concerning how if I don't have wings, I can't help kill the oppressive banner if I'm still up. So it's weird, but it's one of those things where I hope that Xav pulls me down into the arena more often. So the banner is being picked up. Both Arg and Stitch were running Necrolord for this particular dungeon. We have 5 minutes to murder Mordretha. Five minutes, 6 deaths. Sorry, you guys can't hear it, but this video review has all the music that I was listening to that night. And for copyright reasons, I obviously can't just have it unmuted. So. But yeah, so we're holding cooldowns slightly we're holding Lust slightly to line up with Time's cooldowns after this first set of ads spawn. I used mine just as they came off because Wings is 15 seconds off. So I'm just gonna, so I use my minutes and then I'll just use everything together. The fact that I'm missing out on Bloodlust, it kind of hurts a little bit, but it's better to line it up for Time, so Time can better use his Ashen Hollow. And Arc has Storm Elemental up, so they're both getting the most out of it. Now, I still have 10 seconds to go, so I'm just kind of holding and trying to stay as close to Time's DPS as I can at about 7k. Unfortunately, Time is pulling ahead, but it's fine. I will redeem myself in but a moment. Ark unfortunately got clipped there by the spirit because he didn't see it run through the boss. Arguably, that's something I should have warned him about and spoken about, but can't be helped in some cases. But it's fine. Mordretha's got 20% of her health left and 3 minutes to go. As long as we don't wipe, we have Keystone Hero. So, we go through. Time goes down there, but it's fine. As I said, 3 minutes to go. We've had the combat res, so it wasn't a concern. Stormy got a sack. And we just fight against the pull and proceed to Muller. We're safe where we're stood in this corner. Arc is a little bit far out, so kind of plays a little bit of the hokey cokey with the spirits. And there we go. Keystone Hero. We have now achieved all 20 of the Mythic Pluses in time, which means we have the teleports, and the next goal is to get them all 20s, both tyrannical and fortified, where we can, because we have a few, like our best fortified Sanguine Depths, for instance, is a 17, and it's actually when I was tanking it. So getting it in DPS score would be fantastic, and trying to get to 2400 score, because as you can see, or as you saw on the screen, 2377, which is good. It's a high score, puts me in the top 500 in the world, but we can get higher. And I'd like to get higher, because I'm hoping that if I can't get it this season, the 2700, I will get it next season for the 0.1% title. At least that's the goal. So hopefully you guys have enjoyed this video and will stick with me while we continue to improve going forward. In the meantime, I hope you have a lovely remainder of your week, and I will catch you in the next video. Take care, folks, and I'll see you later.